Welcome to our channel, Auburn Chronicles. If you enjoyed rural stories, like and subscribe for more, and tell us in the comments what time it is and where you're watching from. And now, Adam will take us into today's story.
On March 12, 1994, Raymond Kohler walked into Brennan Farm Equipment in Hutchinson, Kansas at 9:17 in the morning. He was 41 years old. He had been farming his family's 520 acres for 19 years. He had driven past this dealership 400 times in his life and had never once considered buying new. His father hadn't bought new. His grandfather hadn't bought new. The Kohlers bought used, paid cash, and kept machines running until they couldn't be fixed anymore. That was the system. That was survival. But Ray had been thinking about something his neighbor Carl Thiessen said 3 weeks earlier while they were loading seed into Carl's truck. Carl had said that the older a man got, the less time he had to waste on breakdowns. Carl was 63. Ray was 41. Ray hadn't thought the comment was meant for him, but it stayed in his head anyway. Ray's current tractor was a 1978 International 1086 that he'd bought in 1982 for $11,500. It had been a good machine. It still ran, but it was 16 years old now, and in the last 2 seasons it had cost Ray 4 days of field work. 4 days lost to a fuel pump, a hydraulic line, and an electrical short that took 2 trips to the shop to diagnose. 4 days wasn't catastrophic. But 4 days wasn't nothing either. Ray had 3 children. His oldest son, Trevor, was 14 and starting to show interest in the equipment. His daughter, Natalie, was 11. His youngest, Marcus, was 7. Ray's wife, Diane, worked part-time at the grain elevator in town and kept the farm's books in a 3-ring binder at the kitchen table every Sunday night. They were not wealthy. They were not struggling. They were exactly in the middle, which in farming meant they were always 6 months away from either direction. The dealership smelled like hydraulic fluid and new paint. There were 3 tractors inside the showroom, a small one Ray didn't recognize, a mid-size Magnum, and in the center, under 2 overhead lights, a Case IH 7130. It was red and black and enormous. It had a cab with air conditioning and a radio. It had 4-wheel drive. The spec sheet on the window said it had 130 horsepower and a 16-speed transmission. Ray had never driven anything with more than 8 speeds. A salesman named Roger approached. Roger was in his mid-50s and wore a short-sleeve button-down with a Case IH logo on the pocket. He did not try to shake Ray's hand right away. He just said, "You looking or buying?" Ray said, "Just looking." Roger nodded and gestured toward the 7130. "That one just came in last week. It's the last 94 model we're going to get before the 95s show up. If you're in the market, now's the time. End of model year pricing." Ray walked around the tractor slowly. He touched the fender. He opened the cab door and looked inside. The seat was covered in plastic. The steering wheel had never been turned under load. Everything smelled synthetic and perfect. Roger said, "You farm around here?" Ray said, "North of town, 520 acres, wheat and milo." Roger said, "What are you running now?" Ray said, "An 86. Roger didn't ask which brand. He just nodded. "You getting parts okay?" Ray said, "Mostly." Roger said, "Mostly means sometimes you're not." Ray didn't answer. Roger said, "This machine here, you'll run it 15 years easy. Probably 20 if you take care of it. And parts? Case IH has got the best network in the state. You won't wait 3 days for a hydraulic hose. You call us, we get it to you same day or next day. That's worth something when you're trying to get a field done." Ray knew this was a sales pitch, but it was also true. He had waited 3 days for a hydraulic hose in 1992. Roger pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "Let me show you what we can do on financing," Ray said. "I didn't say I was financing." Roger said, "I know, but let me show you anyway." They sat down at a desk near the parts counter. Roger wrote numbers on the paper with a mechanical pencil. The tractor's list price was $68,400. Roger said he could do $64,900 if Ray made a decision by the end of the month. He said Case IH was offering 6.9% APR on 60-month loans. He did the math. With $15,000 down, Ray's payment would be $978 a month for 5 years. Ray looked at the number for a long time. $978 a month was more than his mortgage. It was more than his family spent on groceries. It was a third of what he'd cleared last year after expenses. Roger said, I know it seems like a lot, but think about it this way. You're not just buying a tractor, you're buying time. Time you're not spending in the shop, time you're not waiting on parts, time you're in the field when you need to be. And when you're ready to trade it in 10 or 15 years from now, this thing's going to hold value. Case IH holds value better than anything else out there. Ray asked if he could think about it. Roger said, absolutely. Take your time. But I'll tell you, I've got 2 other guys looking at this same unit. End of model year, people are moving. You wait too long, it'll be gone. Ray drove home and didn't say anything to Diane that night. He thought about the tractor while he fed the cattle. He thought about it while he checked the wheat. He thought about it while he sat at the kitchen table after everyone had gone to bed. 3 days later, he went back to the dealership. Roger was there. Ray said he wanted to move forward, but he wanted to put $20,000 down instead of $15,000. That would drop the payment to $880 a month. Roger ran the numbers and said it worked. They shook hands. Ray signed the paperwork on March 18, 1994. The tractor was delivered to his farm on March 23rd. Diane saw it roll off the trailer and didn't say anything at first. Then she said, "Is that new?" Ray said, "Yes." She said, "How much?" He told her. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Okay, we'll make it work." That was the last time they talked about it. The first year was good. Ray used the 7130 for everything. Plowing, planting, spraying, hauling grain. It never missed a beat. The cab was quiet. The air conditioning worked. The four-wheel drive pulled evenly through wet ground that would have bogged down the old International. Trevor started riding with him in the cab during summer, learning how to shift, how to watch the hydraulics, how to read the field. Ray liked that. He liked the idea that his son was learning on equipment that wouldn't let them down. The payment was manageable the first year because wheat prices held steady and the Milo came in better than expected. Ray made the $880 payment every month without touching their savings. Diane kept tracking it in her binder. Every month, she wrote the payment amount and the remaining balance. She didn't comment on it, she just wrote it down. In 1995, wheat prices dropped 11%. The Milo yield was average. Ray still made the payments, but 2 of them came out of savings. Diane noted it in the binder with a small red mark. In 1996, they had a late freeze that damaged 15% of the wheat. Ray made the payments, but 4 of them came from savings that year. Diane didn't say anything, but Ray could feel her watching the numbers. By 1997, Ray had made 36 payments. He owed $28,000. The tractor still ran perfectly. Not a single breakdown, not a single surprise repair. It had done exactly what Roger said it would do. But the ease Ray thought he was buying, the time, the reliability, the peace of mind, was being swallowed by the payment. Every month, $880 left the account. Every month, Diane wrote it down. Every month, Ray felt a small tightness in his chest that hadn't been there before he bought the tractor. Trevor was 17 now. He was strong and capable and worked the farm like he'd been born to it. One evening in May, while they were greasing the 7130 together, Trevor said, "Dad, how much longer on the payment?" Ray said, 2 more years. Trevor said, "And then we own it?" Ray said, "Yeah." Trevor didn't say anything else, but Ray could tell he'd been thinking about it. Thinking about what it cost. Thinking about whether it was worth it. Ray finished the last payment in March of 1999. 5 years, exactly as planned. He wrote the check, mailed it, and waited for the title to arrive. When it came, Diane filed it in the binder without ceremony. The tractor was theirs now, free and clear. Ray had paid $64,900 for it. With interest, the total had been $72,680. He thought he would feel relief. He thought the tightness would go away. It didn't, because now the question wasn't whether he could afford the payment. The question was whether the tractor would hold the value Roger had promised. By 2003, the 7130 had 4,200 hours on it. It still ran beautifully. Ray had replaced the air filter, the fuel filter, and 1 set of rear tires. Total maintenance cost over 9 years, $3,400. By every reasonable measure, the tractor had been reliable. But the market was changing. A neighbor 2 miles south, a man named Delbert Schroeder, bought a new Case IH MXM 175 with GPS guidance and variable rate technology. Delbert showed Ray the screen one afternoon. He said, This thing drives itself. You just program the rows and it holds the line within 2 inches. I don't even touch the wheel anymore." Ray looked at the screen. He didn't say anything. Delbert said, "You ever think about upgrading?" Ray said, "The 7130's still good." Delbert said, "I didn't say it wasn't. I'm just saying the new stuff makes life easier." Ray went home and didn't mention the conversation to Diane, but he started noticing the new tractors more. He saw them at the co-op. He saw them at the equipment dealer when he went in for parts. He saw them in the fields when he drove past other farms. They all had screens. They all had guidance systems. They all had features the 7130 didn't have and would never have. In 2005, Trevor graduated from Kansas State with a degree in agricultural business. He came back to the farm full-time. He was 25 years old and full of ideas. He wanted to try no-till. He wanted to add soybeans to the rotation. He wanted to soil test every field and adjust inputs by zone. Ray listened to all of it. Some of it made sense, some of it didn't. But Trevor was smart, and Ray trusted him. One evening in June, Trevor said, "Dad, if we're going to do variable rate, we need guidance." Ray said, "The 7130 doesn't have guidance." Trevor said, "I know, that's what I'm saying." Ray said, "You want me to buy another tractor?" Trevor said, "No. I'm saying maybe we sell the 7130 and get something with the tech we need." Ray felt something cold move through his chest. He said, "The 7130 runs fine." Trevor said, "I know it does, but fine isn't the same as capable. If we're going to compete, we need equipment that can do what the other guys are doing." Ray said, "We're not other guys, we're us." Trevor didn't push it, but the conversation stayed between them like a splinter. In 2007, Ray called Roger at the dealership. Roger was still there, grayer now, but still selling. Ray said, "I'm thinking about trading in my 7130. What's it worth?" Roger said, "Let me look it up." Ray heard typing on a computer. Then Roger said, "How many hours?" Ray said, 5,800. Roger said, "Condition?" Ray said, "Excellent. No damage. Maintenance is current." Roger was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I can probably give you 18,000 for it." Ray said, 18? Roger said, "Yeah. Maybe 19 if it's really clean. But the market's tough right now on older units. Everybody wants the new stuff. GPS, auto steer, all that. The 7130 is a great tractor, but it doesn't have any of that." Ray said, "You told me it would hold value." Roger said it did, for a while, but the technology moved. That's just how it goes. Ray thanked him and hung up. He sat in his kitchen and did the math. He'd paid $72,680 total. 13 years later, it was worth $18,000. He'd lost $54,680 in value. That wasn't depreciation. That was obliteration. He didn't tell Trevor about the call. He didn't tell Diane. He just kept farming. In 2009, the economy collapsed. Wheat prices spiked briefly, then crashed. Credit dried up. Ray watched 3 neighbors sell out within 18 months. One of them was Delbert Schroeder, the man with the MXM 175 and the guidance system. Delbert had financed too much too fast. When the prices dropped, he couldn't cover the payments. The bank took the farm. The equipment went to auction. Ray went to the auction, not to buy, but to see. The MXM 175 sold for $41,000. Delbert had paid $110,000 for it in 2003. 6 years later, it was worth a third of that. Ray stood in the back of the crowd and watched it happen. He thought about his 7130. He thought about the $18,000 Roger had offered 2 years earlier. He thought about the fact that he still owned his tractor, free and clear, and Delbert didn't own anything anymore. That night, Diane said, "You've been quiet." Ray said, "Delbert lost the farm." She said, "I heard." Ray said he had all the new equipment, all the technology. It didn't matter. Diane said, "No, it didn't." Ray said, "The 7130's paid for." Diane said, "I know." That was all they said. But something shifted in Ray that night. He stopped thinking about what the tractor was worth. He started thinking about what it could do. By 2012, the 7130 had 9,100 hours. Ray replaced the clutch and the hydraulic pump. Cost, $4,800. It was the most expensive repair he'd ever done on the machine, but it wasn't catastrophic. The tractor still started every time. It still pulled. It still worked. Trevor was 32 now. He'd married a woman named Lauren who worked as a teacher in Hutchinson. They had 2 kids. Trevor still wanted to modernize the operation, but he'd stopped pushing his father about the tractor. He knew Ray wasn't going to sell it. He knew Ray couldn't sell it. Not because it didn't run, because selling it would mean admitting the investment had been a mistake. And Ray wasn't ready to admit that. In 2014, Marcus, Ray's youngest son, came back to the farm after 6 years working construction in Wichita. He was 27 and tired of the city. He said he wanted to help. Ray was 61 now. His back hurt more than it used to. His knees were stiff in the mornings. He didn't say it out loud, but he needed the help. Marcus learned the operation quickly. He was good with equipment. He didn't mind long hours, and he didn't care that the 7130 didn't have GPS or auto steer or any of the things Trevor had wanted. Marcus said, "It runs. That's all that matters." Ray liked hearing that. In 2016, the transmission started slipping. Ray took it to the shop. The mechanic said, "I can rebuild it, but it's going to be $6,200. Ray said, "Do it." Diane said, "Ray, that's more than the tractor's worth." Ray said, "It's worth what it does." She didn't argue. The transmission was rebuilt. The tractor kept running. By 2018, most of the farms around Ray had consolidated. The 520-acre operations were gone. The new standard was 2,000 acres or more. Big equipment, big loans, big risk. Ray and his sons still farmed their 520 acres the same way they always had. They didn't expand. They didn't borrow. They didn't chase growth. They just farmed. Trevor had bought a used Case IH Magnum 210 in 2015 with GPS and all the modern features. It was a good machine. It did what Trevor needed it to do. But the 7130 was still in the shed. Ray still used it for lighter work, spraying, hauling, odd jobs. It had 11,400 hours now. Parts were getting harder to find. The dealership didn't stock them anymore. Ray had to order everything online and wait. One afternoon, Marcus said, "Dad, why don't we sell the 7130? We've got the Magnum. We don't need 2 tractors." Ray said, "We might." Marcus said, "For what?" Ray didn't answer. The truth was, Ray didn't know. He just knew he wasn't ready to let it go. In 2020, the pandemic hit. Grain prices swung wildly. Supply chains broke down. Ray watched the news and didn't recognize the world anymore. But the farm kept running. The 7130 kept running. When everything else felt uncertain, the tractor was the one thing that stayed the same. In 2022, Ray turned 69. His hair was white. His hands shook slightly when he held a wrench. He still farmed, but Marcus and Trevor did most of the heavy work now. Ray mostly supervised. He checked fields, he made decisions, he watched. One morning in April, he walked into the shed and saw the 7130 sitting in the corner. It had 12,200 hours on it. The paint was faded, the decals were peeling, the seat was cracked, but it still started. He climbed into the cab and sat there for a while, not running it, just sitting. He thought about the day he bought it. He thought about Roger's promise. 15 years, easy, maybe 20. It had been 28 years. He thought about the $72,680 he'd paid. He thought about the repairs, the clutch, the transmission, the tires, the hoses. All told, he'd spent $14,600 on maintenance over 28 years. Total cost of ownership, $87,280. If he sold it today, he might get $4,000. Maybe $5,000 if he found the right buyer. The math was brutal. But the math wasn't the whole story. The whole story was this. The tractor had never left him stranded. Not once in 28 years. It had plowed every field he'd asked it to plow. It had planted every seed. It had pulled every load. It had worked in heat and cold and rain and drought. It had outlasted neighbors who bought newer, fancier machines. It had outlasted the bank loans that buried Delbert Schroeder. It had outlasted the economy that collapsed in 2009. It had outlasted Ray's expectations. Roger had said it would last 15 years. He'd been wrong. It had lasted nearly twice that. And it was still running. In the summer of 2024, Trevor came to Ray with a proposal. He wanted to lease an additional 240 acres from a retiring neighbor. It was good ground, it made sense, but it would mean more equipment, more cost, more risk. Ray listened to the whole pitch. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" Trevor said, "I need to know you're okay with it." Ray said, "Are you going to borrow?" Trevor said, "Some, not much." Ray said, "How much is not much?" Trevor said, 40,000. Ray looked at his son. Trevor was 44 now. He had 2 teenagers. He had a mortgage. He had a life built around this farm. Ray thought about the weight of $40,000. He thought about the 7130. He thought about 28 years of payments and repairs and second guessing. He said, if you borrow, make sure you can survive a bad year. Trevor said, I know. Ray said, I'm serious. You borrow for growth, you better be ready to lose. Trevor said, I'll be careful. Ray nodded. Okay. Trevor leased the ground. He borrowed the money. He bought a used planter. The first year went well. Ray didn't say much about it, but he watched. He saw his son making the same choices he'd made 30 years earlier. He saw the same hope, the same risk, the same belief that good equipment and hard work would be enough. He didn't know if Trevor would be right. He just knew Trevor had to find out for himself. In January of 2025, Ray turned 72. The farm was quiet. The wheat was dormant under snow. The equipment was sheltered in the sheds. Ray spent most of his days inside now, watching the weather, reading the markets, waiting for spring. One afternoon, Marcus came into the house and said, Dad, I've got a guy interested in the 7130. Ray said, What guy? Marcus said, a farmer down by Kingman. He's starting out. Needs a tractor he can afford. He offered $4,500. Ray didn't say anything. Marcus said, I know it's not much, but it's more than we'd get scrapping it. Ray said, I'm not scrapping it. Marcus said, I didn't say we were. I'm just saying if we're going to sell it, now's the time, before something major breaks. Ray said, Nothing's broken. Marcus said, Not yet. Ray looked out the window at the shed. He could see the corner of the 7130's cab through the door. He said, Tell him no. Marcus said, Why? Ray said, Because I'm not done with it. Marcus didn't argue. He just nodded and left. That night, Diane sat down next to Ray on the couch. She said, You're never going to sell that tractor, are you? Ray said, Probably not. She said, Why? Ray thought about it for a long time. Then he said, Because it's the only thing I ever bought new, and it's the only thing that didn't let me down. Diane didn't say anything. She just reached over and held his hand. The 7130 is still in the shed. It has 12,610 hours on it now. The engine still fires, the hydraulics still lift, the transmission still shifts. Ray doesn't use it much anymore. Marcus handles most of the work. But every few weeks, Ray walks out to the shed, climbs into the cab, and starts it up. He lets it idle for a few minutes. He listens to the engine. He feels the vibration through the steering wheel. He thinks about Roger's promise. 15 years. The dealer had been wrong about the timeline. But he'd been right about one thing. The tractor had lasted. It had cost more than Ray wanted to admit. It had lost more value than anyone predicted. It had become obsolete while it was still running, but it had never quit. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. Ray had bought the tractor because he thought it would save him time. It didn't. He thought it would hold value. It didn't. He thought it would make farming easier. It didn't. But it had done something else, something he hadn't expected. It had stayed. When neighbors sold out, the 7130 stayed. When the economy collapsed, the 7130 stayed. When new technology made it irrelevant, the 7130 stayed. When Ray couldn't afford to replace it, the 7130 stayed. And now at 72, with his sons running the farm and his hands too stiff to work a wrench, Ray understands what he bought in 1994. He didn't buy a tractor. He bought a constant. He bought something that wouldn't leave. In a life full of variables, weather, markets, health, family, debt, the 7130 had been the one equation that never changed. It had been the one thing he could count on. Not because it was the best, not because it was the smartest investment, but because it was there, every morning, every season, every year. Roger had promised 15 years. Ray had gotten 31. And the tractor was still running.